Okay, thank you everybody. So our next session will be an exclusive Q&A, and we'll have a look at the next wave, DRC, the right time and to enter, and is it the right time to invest? We will have a panel discussion with three panelists that will include Patrick Katabua, who is the account director and SADC head lead at Cushman Wakefield Bro. It will also include Dion Brewer, who is the group CEO of Forum Properties Africa, and also Thierry Nawej, who is the CEO and co-owner of Aura Consulting Group. But initially, we'll start off with a presentation that gives an overview of investing into the DRC via Patrick. So can I welcome Patrick up, please?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. So we're going to start off by doing a quick fly-through of DRC, because a couple of members reached out to me to just get a feel and flavor of what it looks and feels like. So I'm from Cushman & Wakefield Bro. We don't have presence in DRC, and neither does CBRE or Knight Frank or Jalal or Savile Row, but there's some form of activity taking place, which I'll take you through. So DRC is about the size of South Africa, Kenya, and Zambia put together. Population of 80 million, and the capital, Kinshasa alone, is about 80% of Zambia as a country. So that's just to give you a perspective of the sheer size of the country. So for about 30 years, the country was ruled by Mobutu Sese Seko. And during his time, from a real estate perspective, what happened was zero, pretty much. And in his late age, of course, Laurent Kabila came over and tried to negotiate a smooth transition of power, which was handled by Nelson Mandela. And that didn't really work much. So Laurent Kabila toppled Mobutu, and he was then assassinated in 2000. And his son took over power, and he was president for 19 years until last year, where Etienne Tshisekedi took over as president, and he's been president from January until recently. So just from a high-level demographic perspective, some key statistics to notice here is, from an internet penetration perspective, DRC is at 6%. Which is extremely low in comparison to the rest of the cluster, or even in comparison to Francophone countries. If you look at cell phone penetration, around 44%, while South Africa is at over 100%, and it just gives you an indication of the potential that lies in the country. Without being an economist, when you see GDP per capita rising from this perspective, and interest rates going down, it somewhat tells a picture that maybe the country is ripe for additional investment and for borrowings as well. There are now over 20 banks registered in DRC, 20 commercial banks. The minimum capital was about 20 million. This year it was pushed up to 30 million, and next year it is meant to be pushed up to about $50 million. And the currency of trade is pretty much dollars. You can invoice in dollars. Your leases and contracts can be done in dollars. And from what I understand, you can expatriate your funds in dollars as well. From an occupier perspective, you've got Lubumbashi, which is pretty much the capital of the mining region. And you've got Kinshasa, that is the administrative capital. Lubumbashi has a shortage of office, but if you look for it, you will find. So this is an office that was inaugurated a few months ago. It's probably the tallest building in the city. And Kinshasa is blessed with a lot more options. So this is a scheme that we looked at when I was still in the banking industry. It was a $250 million scheme. It looked exactly cut and paste Dubai. We half laughed at it because we thought it was never going to happen. And this is what it looks like today in Kinshasa. Some occupiers, depending on where you look, you may be spoiled for choice, where you have some sort of finishes that you can negotiate on, but rent-free periods and deposit waivers pretty much don't exist. You've got a lot of renovations also taking place, and of recent, consolidation of banks, financial institutions, pension funds have started taking place. And this is because there's some form of formalization taking place in the market. From an industrial perspective, it's primarily dominated by owner-occupiers. And from a retail perspective, I think the traditional trade will be there forever. More than 80% of the market is informal, although you do have formalization that is taking place in the retail sector, where you have one-stop type shops or one-stop type malls that are being developed with familiar brands coming into play as well. Again, Kinshasa is a lot more blessed in comparison to Lubumbashi, where you are spoiled for choices with more known brands as well. You've got the likes of LC Waikiki that have gone in, you've got Mango, you've got ShopRite that is operating and looking at expanding a lot more. You've got Decathlon and so forth. You also have a lot of local brands like Kinmart that are starting to expand quite aggressively. Galaxy Retail, that's in about 4 or 5 different locations across the country. And an interesting wave now is that on the residential side, the biggest demand was in standalone villas, but because you've got a lot of diasporas going back into the country, your sectional title or cluster type developments are starting to come up quite a bit. And of course, the Chinese are taking advantage of it, but they're bringing in a lot of amenities which were not present, and I'm talking 3-5 years ago. From a hospitality perspective, in Lubumbashi, you were not spoiled for choice. You had the Grand Caravia, and that was pretty much it. And in Kinshasa, you had Memling Hotel, and you had the Grand Hotel de Kinshasa. And Kempinski went in and rejuvenated the old Fleuve Congo Hotel. It was an old office block which got renovated, and you can pay a good $320 or so a night. Hilton recently announced that they're going to be having 2 hotels opening by end of 2020. Bond Hotels from SA announced that next year they'll be opening 55 rooms in Kolwezi. Novotel announced just 2 weeks ago at the Africa Hotel Investment Summit that they're going to be opening 3 different hotel branches in the DRC. And this is just to give you an indication of what is happening. From a mixed-use development perspective, there's the very famous Luano City, which Dion Brewer is going to tell us about. You've got office, retail, industrial that have gone in, and they're moving quite rapidly. There's also the Kiswishi project that had come to a halt, but it looks like it might be starting again, which Thierry Naweji is going to touch on. And in Kinshasa, Cité du Fleuve, this looks like Dubai. Again, in my banking days, this was brought to us and we thought, I don't think this is going to happen. We told the developer the best we could do was give him 10% of what he was looking for on a 2-year loan term. And this was because of country risk challenges. 10 years later, this is what it looks like. It's 60% sold, and a 3-bedroom house of 180 square meters will cost you about $220,000. Still keeping on with mixed-use developments, there's a couple of them that are planned for the next 2-3 years, and the question is whether it will be as successful as Cité du Fleuve. From an infrastructure perspective, this was Kinshasa Airport about 4 or 5 years ago, and this is what it looks like today. The road from the airport to the guest house where we usually stay, it would take us about 3 hours to get there. When I was there in June, it took us 45 minutes. So either people are not driving or there's a mass infrastructure investment that has taken place. And of course, the big game changer is the Inga 3 project, if it's going to happen. This is a project that is big enough to feed the entire Africa from an electricity perspective. These are things that my grandparents used to speak about around the table, but the Chinese are now involved. So if the Chinese are involved, yeah, there's probably a 50+% chance that it may happen. So I'm going to call on my panelists, Dion Brewer and Thierry Nawej, if you please could come to the fore, where we'll have a brief discussion, and then time permitting, we may have some time for Q&A.